Hello. Sound check. Hope I fixed some of my noise gating options, so hopefully the noise should be a little less today. Also finally figured out how to get the mouse tracking and stuff to work. Yeah. Now we got that little highlight. Let's see. Hello, hey everyone. Let's give maybe, we'll start, I guess, maybe like 1-2 minutes after the start time, so you get like 3-4 minutes. Also, just if anybody hasn't, if anybody's new or wants to see the slides, you can use the /Notion command to get the link to like the homepage. That homepage is gonna kind of show you the whole syllabus. It'll also have links to the old homework and sessions. But we really just started, like the bootcamp really just started last week, so still very early. We also have the /slides command, I think. Oh, a bit louder. Okay, cool. No problem. How's that? Is that a little better? Yeah, I think. Yeah. Let me know. Yeah, let me know if that's a little better. I might do a little bit more. Cool. So the /slides command or !slides command will give you the link to these slides if you want to check it out. Besides that, Zach, my page I loaded on GitHub doesn't show any of the CSS, just the HTML structure. Don't worry too much about honestly, I think a lot of the feedback I got from last session, I think I rushed into it a lot. I think I kind of overloaded, and the GitHub stuff was really just like a bonus component, but I kind of made it a prominent part of the lecture. So apologies, because I know a lot of people do have questions about little issues there. You probably didn't do anything wrong. My first guess was probably just like the CSS file maybe didn't get uploaded properly to GitHub. And the GitHub stuff is kind of tricky because we basically introduced GitHub and tried to use it all in one go, so it's kind of a lot. So don't worry about that right now. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna go through, today's like really focused on just HTML, CSS, getting more into like the nuances of those. And on Thursday, we're gonna revisit GitHub. So I promise y'all by Thursday, a lot of the questions that we had that were remaining from last Thursday's session, we will be in a lot better place to solve those. So I guess my short answer is just hold off until Thursday. Don't worry too much about that deployment project because we're going to revisit it and hopefully it all makes sense by then. So I'm really glad we do that feedback stuff because I get a lot of, after each stream, it's good to get the feedback to see, like last time it was clear that I didn't do a good job of time management. I went a little over and I rushed through a lot of the curriculum. So I think that's why there was confusion on the homework, especially the GitHub part. So that's definitely on me. And it's, this today is going to be a lot more compressed. And hopefully we'll do better in the pacing as well. So Mr. Indigo Chan asked, where do I pay? There's no pay. This is a free bootcamp. So I guess your payment is just, showing up. And if you want to participate in homework too, you can do that. But yeah, this is all free. Once I become a Twitch affiliate, of course, you're welcome to subscribe. But, that's obviously not required. And I actually think after today's stream, we should be eligible for subscription or affiliate. So hopefully that goes well. I agree. I like free stuff too. Definitely. I think especially since, all the coding boot camps that are pretty reputable, they cost like $20,000. And it's just like a bunch of years ago, I would say that $20K investment probably was more worth it because back then the tech industry was just hiring a lot more entry-level positions. Now that there's so many boot camps out there, so many CS grads, a lot of those top boot camps cannot guarantee you a job, right? I think their placement rates are probably like under 40%, maybe even less than that. So it's like if you're gonna pay 20K for like a 30% chance to get a job after, that's like not really that worth it, right? So I think the free way is a little better return on investment. Hey everyone, I see a lot of familiar faces. Also see some new faces too, so that's great. I'm gonna say it one more time, I guess, just for all the new folks. If you're new here, welcome. This is the second week of a free coding bootcamp that we're doing here on Twitch. You didn't miss much since we just started off last week. But if you do want to go back and catch up on old sessions and just kind of see the whole syllabus and what we're about, you can use this !Notion command that you can use that command that I just posted in the chat. That'll give you like the home page. If you want to use our Discord, you can use the !Discord command. That's going to, show you where to join the Discord. And finally, if you do want to see the slides for today, just so you can kind of follow along or take notes on your own, you can use the !slides. And do let me know if any of those links are not working. I did update them before, but just want to make sure that they're all good. Cool, so we're 3 minutes in. I think we're gonna go ahead and get it started. So just also preface, today is gonna be like the main portion of today's lecture is gonna be an hour, but we're gonna leave 15 minutes after for Q&A. And I think today, Jackie's not here, she's out at some work. So I think today I'm gonna do a lot of the questions as they come in. So basically feel free to ask questions about the slides as we go through them. We'll answer them. And of course, if you have any other questions that are not maybe related to those exact slides, maybe they're kind of related to a larger issue, I will probably say something like, oh, we'll hold off until the end for Q&A. So basically, most questions we're gonna try to answer like as we go. Some questions that may not be relevant to that exact slide, we'll batch and answer at the end. So that way, hopefully nobody feels like left behind or feels like their questions being ignored. Okay, cool. Let's get right into it because yeah, we don't have as much to go through as last time. I tried to trim it down a little bit, but still want to be conscious of time. Cool. So today is the title of today is basically HTML CSS continued. Last week we did talk about a lot about web development tooling. We talked a little bit about HTML and CSS, but very little, right? We basically just kind of walked through a real example first, and we kind of skimmed through all the like details. So today the focus is a little bit more on those details. So this is the third session, and you're welcome to watch the first two sessions on Twitch or YouTube if you did miss them. Cool, so we always start off with a changelog, which this changelog is basically like what we changed since last session, so last Thursday. I don't know if you guys can notice, but we now have click and keyboard tracking, which is nice. So all my clicks and keyboard strokes you can now see on the screen. That was a really popular feedback from last week, and I realized that I should have tested that earlier. So thanks to everyone for that feedback. Working on the mic quality, I reduced the noise gaining a little bit because I know there's some feedback there. So do let me know if they're still having issues with the mic quality. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but we're going to work on our time management a little bit. I went over like quite a bit last time, so do want to be conscious of everyone's time. And yeah, also the same thing about earlier, the relevant questions. Feel free to just drop questions in the chat, and we'll answer most of them as we go through. Some of them, they might not be relevant to that slide. We'll gather them and answer them at the end during the Q&A time. Also added an agenda to the slides. So that's going to be coming up in like 1-2 slides where you can kind of just see the high level overview of today. I also switched the Stream browser from Arc to Chrome. Arc was a little, most people do not have Arc, most people have Chrome. So just switching the tooling over to something that's a little bit more familiar is probably going to make it a lot easier to follow. And I also added a fresh new install of Visual Studio Code. My Visual Studio Code, like the one I use for work, is pretty specced out, where like there's a lot of like weird extensions and stuff I have set up that might be confusing to new learners. So I just have like a fresh install that I'm going to be using for the streams as we go through the projects and stuff. So yeah. Cool. So let's just do a little quick recap of last Thursday. So last Thursday, the focus was really on tooling. So by this point, and of course, feel free to either do this, now during the slides, or if you feel like you don't have time, just feel free to do it after. But at this point, we should have a code editor installed. The preference being VS Code, but also doesn't matter. Like you can use any code editor you want, but I just recommend VS Code because it's free and it's pretty great. Preferably have one of our recommended browsers, so Chrome or Firefox is just what we recommend, just because it's familiar and they have good dev tools. So that's why we recommend those. And ideally, you should also have a GitHub account. The GitHub account is not going to be required at all today. But today, if you do want to follow along the project while we are going through the demo, I definitely think you should probably have the code editor installed, Visual Studio Code, or have one of our recommended browsers. But if you have those two, then you're basically ready to go for today. The GitHub account, that's not required today. Mentioned a little bit earlier, but on Thursday, so in 2 days, we're going to be doing a lot more of a deeper dive into GitHub. So I know a lot of GitHub stuff is confusing for last time. We're going to hopefully get into all of that stuff on Thursday. So just to give you a heads up there. In our homework from last time, we had two different parts of homework. We had the tooling set up. We had, well, I guess 3. The second one was messing around with DevTools. But the meat of the homework last time was really to download a template from this website called HTML5Up and just mess around with it. Just kind of like familiarize yourself with the structure. I know some people took the bonus step, which is basically to deploy it. But, once again, that's not required, right? Mainly, we wanted to get an idea of what a full HTML site looks like, just so you guys can get familiar with that. And yeah, we'll be going back to GitHub on Thursday. Cool. So the agenda today is fairly straightforward. There's only a couple of major parts here. Basically, we're just going to explain the basics of HTML just from the start and just really understand it holistically. Then we're going to be talking about structure in HTML. And then we're going to talk about like text, like the different types of text, HTML, all that stuff. Then we're going to get into the basics of CSS. We're going to talk about how to style text in particular with CSS. And then at the end, Q&A. So definitely still very elementary level HTML, CSS, but the goal here is just to get a very high level grasp of these two because, we definitely want to focus on the fundamentals here. So cool. Yeah, for sure. I'm glad it has you hyped. Yeah, I think last time I definitely made the mistake of adding too much to the agenda. I think it was a lot more crammed. So hopefully today, we can take it a little slower and everyone will get a more holistic view. So thanks to everyone for the feedback there. That was super helpful. All right, cool. So let's just get into it. So HTML is basically the basic building block of all web pages, right? It essentially, sorry, my cat is, sorry, I might also stop intermittently because my cats are being bad. Sorry about that. So HTML is the basic building block of the internet. It basically tells the browser what the skeleton or basic structure of a web page should look like. And it really revolves around 2 key terms. So you only really need to know 2 key terms when it comes to understanding the whole of HTML. And these are elements and attributes. So let's get into that right now. So elements are really the bread and butter of HTML. This is what an element might look like, right? This example here, we have this like these caret symbols, right? You guys see that? The caret symbols, the word button, and then we have some text here like click me, right? And then we have another set of caret symbols, but this time the caret symbol comes with a slash after. But basically all of this funky syntax together, this is what we would call an element. And in this case, this is a button element that says the word click me. So an element, the specific definition is it's everything that comes from the start tag to the end tag. And a tag is identified by the use of these little caret symbols, right? So this is the start tag for the button and the end tag for the button. So we got a question in the chat. What is syntax? Yeah, great question. So syntax it's one of those vague words that's probably easier to give an example. Whenever I use the word syntax, I guess in a programming sense, syntax is just like the language that we're using. So this is basically like when we see this this text right here, this tells us this is HTML syntax. And we know that because of these little caret symbols. So that's probably not the best definition, but I guess we can just, for now, just think of syntax as like the language used in this encoding, right? So there's gonna be like HTML syntax that's unique to HTML. So in this case, HTML looks kind of like this. there's CSS syntax, which will look a lot different, and there's JavaScript syntax, which looks like a different thing entirely. So basically, it's just the three different ways, three different languages, and the symbols, I guess, that represent each language. I don't know. That's probably not the best definition. So do let me know if that makes it more confusing. But that's probably the best I have right now for an actual like definition of syntax. Cool. So basically, I think what I want us to take away from here is that whenever you see code that looks kind of like this, and by this I mean you see these little caret symbols, and you see these tags, right? This is how we know this is HTML, right? This is like a very signature part of HTML code. So HTML revolves around these elements, right? There's like a button element, there's text elements, which we'll get into. There's all sorts of elements, right? And you don't have to memorize all the elements, right? I think that's one of the common things when you're taking HTML courses. Like they'll just go through all 20 or 50 elements and basically have to memorize them. I don't think that's needed. You know, it's definitely good to know the most popular elements, but naturally as you build projects, you'll come to understand more elements just by osmosis, right? Like you'll see them and you'll recognize them. You don't necessarily need to be told what exactly they are. Your brain will start to pick up the patterns as you start to move along these projects. So there are a lot of elements. Don't worry about memorizing all of them. For now, I just want us to take away that elements are basically the bread and butter of HTML. That's the core part of HTML. Cool. Hopefully that makes sense. And once again, we're going to be demoing all this with the actual demo that we're going to build together. So I feel like that's when a lot of this stuff is going to come together. So let's hopefully when we get there, it'll make more sense. Cool. So the second part of HTML that I want us to take away here is our attributes. And we're not going to be talking about attributes too much today. I would say attributes are a little bit more intermediate for HTML. But for now, I just want us to be able to recognize what an attribute is. And in this example, right, this is a similar code example that I had in the previous slide, where once we have this button element, right? We have this word button, this text click me, and then this end tag for the button, right? This is all, the same thing as the last slide. But as you can see, there's some bolded text here. And this bolded text is the attribute here. And you don't have to worry about what this actually means. I just want us to recognize that it's inside this tag here. This text is inside this tag. And this is what we would refer to as the ID attribute, right? By the word ID here. And there's a question. So is the word button a tag in the previous slide? Yeah, so a tag. So in this example, that's actually a really good question because there's a lot of like tags and elements seem very similar. And honestly, it's not, like if you ask the professional web developer to like define a tag, define an element, I feel like most of them wouldn't be able to do it that well because it's just kind of one of the things you just like know, so generally as you're like a practitioner, like you're not able to explain it that well. But technically what we have here in this little example, we have two tags. This tag right here, this is one tag, right? And we know it's a tag because it starts with this less than or greater than symbol and ends with this less than symbol. And then we have this end tag, which also starts with the greater than symbol and ends with the less than symbol. Even though we have this slash, the slash basically says this is the end tag, right? So we have the start and we have the end, and everything in between is the content. So everything, all of this together, these two tags makes up an element. Hey Tim, how's it going? I didn't recognize your username last time, so I was like, how does this person know me? But nice to see you. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So this whole thing is the element. The element is made up of two tags. So hopefully that makes sense. Once again, this is not like school. It's not like you're going to be quizzed on the definition of an element. You're not going to be, even in coding interviews, you're not going to be asked like, what is an element? What is a tag? Like that's not something that we're really trying to drill into here. We're more focused on the practice, right? We're more focused on how we use the elements rather than the specific definitions. So hopefully that makes sense. Cool. So really quick, back to attributes. Yeah, what I want us to gather here, once again, we're not focused on the definition so much. We're just focusing on recognizing what this looks like. And an attribute, basically, if we look at this tag, this button tag, there's some text in here that's bolded, and the text that's bolded is what we would call an attribute. In this case, this is the ID attribute. What does this mean? Well, that's a little beyond the scope of today. Like, once again, the attributes part is a little bit more kind of intermediate. It's going to make more sense once we start to put everything together more holistically. For now, the goal is just to recognize that this is one tag, this is the content, this is the end tag, all of this together is an element, and that this text that is bolded in this first tag is an attribute. This is going to make a lot more sense once we go into the demo, so don't worry if you're feeling like this is kind of weird. So let's see, we have a question here. Did you put it in bold because you want us to see it better, or is an attribute syntax in bold? Yeah, that's a really good question. I only put it in bold to help us see it better. The attribute syntax are not actually in bold in our code. It's just something I did here for visual highlight. So no, it's a really great question. Thanks for asking that. So yeah, basically what the purpose of attributes is that they provide additional information about an element. That's all we need to know for now. There's a lot more that we can say about attributes, but let's not get into it because it's going to get confusing without actual examples. Each element has their own unique attributes. Once again, this seems like a whole slew of things to memorize. Like, oh, I have to memorize every unique attribute for each element. You don't. Trust me, you do not. You'll just naturally, after building projects, your brain will make that mental model without having to actually like study and memorize all this stuff. So I'm asking you to trust the process here, that just building projects will naturally help you acquire this knowledge in your head without you having to have to memorize every little bit. Okay, so now we're going to get more into kind of real use of all this knowledge. So basically, you guys might have seen this already from the homework last time, but we're going to talk today a lot about HTML structure. So last time we focused on taking something that already existed, so like a template, an HTML template, right? And we basically just like messed around with it. Today we're going to be talking more about making stuff from scratch, like a blank text file and going from there. So that's where HTML structure comes into play. So HTML files are text files that end in the .html extension. That's how we know it's an HTML file, right? Example from last time, the files, I think, like the core root files index.html. And index.html is usually what we would call the HTML file that's like at the homepage, basically, of a website. And all HTML documents have a required structure that includes these following parts. The first part looks something like this. Looks kind of weird, right? This is like this exclamation mark, all caps, HTML. Once again, memorization isn't important here. It's more the recognition that's more important. And whenever you see something like this is what we would call a doc type declaration. And basically, if you want to know the purpose of what this does, it basically tells a web browser what version is being used of HTML, and you put it at the very top, right? So if we look at almost every index.html out there, usually the very first line is this. There's no other reason behind it besides, it's just needed for the browser to know which version of HTML is being used. So there's not much else, I guess, could dive into here besides, you're just going to get in the habit of putting that at the very, very top. Okay, so right after this declaration, we usually see an HTML tag, right? Something that looks like this, HTML. So this signifies the actual beginning of the document. Some could argue that this doc type does, but technically this HTML tag, this is where the document, everything lives under. And we're going to get into like the examples of this in a second. Next, actually the two most important tags that I want us to take away are not these two that we covered. This is just standard HTML structure stuff. The two most common that I want us to pay attention to here are this one that's called head, the head tag. So the head tag, it contains additional information about the page, otherwise known as metadata, right? Metadata might be a fancy word for a lot of people that aren't in tech. Don't worry about it. It basically just means additional information. So the content inside this head element is not actually shown on the web page, right? So everything you put in that head tag does not actually show up on the website. Like you can't visually see it. So instead, what it's used for are like page titles. I don't know if you can see up here. It's kind of a little blurry actually because the screen's a little big. But the name of this tab, right, says like Coding Bootcamp Session 3. I don't know if y'all can see that. So in this case, this is the page title, right? So this text, Coding Bootcamp Session 3, whatever it says, that would be like in the title of the page, and that would all live in the head tag. Just an example. Another example of something that might be in the head tag is search engine info. So if we basically go to Google, and just type in, I don't know, I'll just type in HTML just for fun. So this website, this first result that comes up, right? So this right here, this first thing, this is the title. So that the in the head tag they put HTML tutorial -W3 schools, and in this text right here, sorry, my cat's being bad. This text right here, this is like the description. So this text is not actually visible on the website. It's like if we clicked on this website, we would not actually see this structured like this. But this is information that is in our head tag for Google or whatever search engine you're using to render. Once again, not super important, but this is just an example of stuff that would be in the head tag. The final thing I want us to know about common stuff that goes into the head tag is are links to CSS files, right? And we're going to get to this in a second, but when we introduce CSS, the CSS has to connect to our HTML, right? HTML is where everything lives, but without CSS, like there's going to be no styling. And the only way to have the CSS kind of talk to the HTML is by putting a link to the CSS in our head tag. So once again, don't worry about memorizing all this, right? This is just a bunch of stuff I'm dumping up front first. And then once we go through the demo, it's going to make a lot more sense once we piece it together. Okay, cool. So the final, and actually the key part of HTML, I think in the most cases, is this part, the body tag. So the body tag, this is what contains all the visible content, right? Everything we see on this website, for example, this all lives in the body. Cool. So basically, main takeaways, this stuff isn't as important. This is stuff that you'll just naturally come to recognize because you'll be building HTML pages from scratch. They're not as important. Head tag is kind of important, right? But the body tag is the most important because the body tag is where you're going to be putting all the content that you're going to see on websites. Cool. So hopefully that all makes sense. And let's, before we, or I guess, I just realized I actually split all of these into separate slides, and I forgot to remove them here. So these are just a recap, I guess. So I'm just going to skip through these. This is basically the same thing that we just went over. Whoops, I'll make that edit before that. Okay, this is what I want to show. Putting it all together, right? This is an example of what a blank, like a starter HTML file would look like. Right, so once again, this is all in a file called like index.html or something like that. As you can see, it starts with this doc type. And then we have this HTML tag. You can optionally say the language of the page. You don't need this. I think by default, it's like English. But if you want to specify English, you can put this lang equals n. Once again, this is an attribute, right? This lang equals n. This is what is an attribute. It looks like. And then the most important parts I want us to zoom in on are the head tag, right? So we have the head tag up here. And remember, this is an element, right? Because it starts with this first tag, ends with this closing tag, as we call it. And this whole part, this you can see my mouse like circling on it. This whole thing coming together, this is the head element. And then this is what I was talking about with the title, right? The title is basically like, the easiest way to think of the title is it's the title that shows up in the browser tab, right? So this text up here, this Coding Bootcamp Session 3, this would be the title of this slides website that I'm using. So this is how you set that. And then we have the body, right? So the body, so this text, my first website, if we were to say, build this website and visit it, we would not see this, right? This would only show up on the tab. And this text right here hello world, this would actually show up in the website. Cool. So this is an example of what it all looks like together. Now let's build our own from scratch. So if you do want to follow along, make sure to have your code editor open and your browser. Presumably you already have a browser open, but if you're not on a browser, just don't worry about it. We can always just review the VODs. But if you do want to follow along, feel free to have your editor open. And that's basically all you need, just your editor in a browser. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take everything we just learned and we're gonna do it. We're gonna build our first basic HTML site from scratch, right? It's not gonna be pretty. There's gonna be almost no content on it, but the exercise here is just to get used to the muscle memory of typing out our basic HTML structure. So this is also, I guess, a good opportunity for me to finally demo what a true starter coding setup looks like, because I know last time we had some issues with that. So I have my editor, my brand new editor right here. As you can see, it has none of my color themes or fonts or fancy stuff configured, which is good. This is probably more like what a fresh download looks like. So I have my code editor up here on the right, and then I'm going to put my browser here on the left. Well, I'm gonna give it a second to pause just to make sure everyone gets caught up there. Okay. Cool. So what we're gonna do first is every time we need to create a new project, you can also think of it as like a new folder, right? We're gonna create a folder. And I recommended this last time, but I didn't really demo it that well because I couldn't share my full screen for some reason. It's good to have, especially for this bootcamp, right? It's good to have one big folder that will contain all your little projects that you build throughout this, little and big projects that you build throughout this bootcamp. So in this case, I'm gonna go to my home folder. So I have my folder called projects. Oh, let me make this a little bigger. There we go. Hopefully it's still a little small. Oh, that's a little too big. So I don't know if you can see it, but I have a projects folder. It's kind of blurry actually. Yeah, the quality might not be super great. It looks like it's making the icons big, but not the actual text, which is kind of funny. But this folder, I have it called projects. So you can have something similar on your computer. It doesn't really matter where it is. In this case, I'm just gonna put all my bootcamp projects in this file called bootcamp projects. And once again, if you're on Windows, you're not gonna have Finder. It's gonna look very different. But basically, it's gonna be in Windows Explorer, right? You basically just want one folder that's easy to get to, that holds all your bootcamp projects. Cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and close that out. I'm gonna go back into Visual Studio Code, and we're gonna create a brand new folder from scratch. We're gonna create this folder in our bootcamp projects folder, or whatever folder you have it named. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and click this. Let me make my cursor easier to see. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, I downloaded this new software called Mouse Pose. That's what's giving me this little effect. Oh yeah, for sure. I am anti-gatekeeping for the most part. Okay. Well, that's a little too dark. All right, that's a little better. Let me know if that's not super visible. I don't want it to be too dark, but I just want to make sure you guys can see the mouse somewhat. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and create a new folder here. So in VS Code, you could do new file, open, or open folder. They all kind of do similar things. I'm gonna click open folder. And then let's go into our projects. So in this case, my bootcamp projects folder is called bootcamp projects. So I'm gonna click that. And instead of opening in this, I don't want to open the whole folder of my bootcamp projects, right? I actually want to create a new folder in the bootcamp projects folder. So I'm going to click on bootcamp projects and click new folder. Once again, if you're Windows, I apologize. Your flow will look very different, but basic idea still stands. Is just create a new folder inside wherever you have your bootcamp projects. Someone asked, hey, is there a way to view picture-in-picture in Chrome with Twitch? I actually don't know. That'd be really convenient. Let me do some research on that. But I don't know off the top. Maybe someone else in the chat might know the answer. But that would actually be really cool. That would make it a lot easier to follow the stream, definitely. So good call. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder here. It doesn't matter what we call it. Let's just call this, I guess, simple, or let's call it our first website, because it's technically our first website that we're building from scratch. Text is kind of small there, but actually I can't make this bigger, but yeah, basically our first website. Naming and spelling isn't that important. I'm just going to go ahead and create this. And then we see our new folder inside our Bootcamp projects folder. And then I'm going to press open. It might give you something like this, like, do you trust the authors? Since it's my own computer and I made it, yes, I guess I trust myself, so I'm just going to hit trust. Okay, and then we should see something that looks like this, right? We don't have any files in our Explorer. Like, this is what the VS Code Explorer is called, like this little file viewer right here. We don't have any files, right? We just have an empty folder. So let's go ahead and take care of that. We're going to create our first HTML file. So remember that HTML files, they end with the .html extension. So let's go ahead and click. The easiest way to create a new file is to, I don't know if you can see that. This is kind of small. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay, it's a little bit better. You click this new file button to the right of where it says like our project name. So click this button right here. And then you should see something that looks like this. So it's going to prompt us to create a new file by declaring its name. So in this case, usually, not all the time, but usually the root, like the home page of a website, is called index.html. In general, for programming, the first file that, like the entry file or root, or, there's many names for the same thing. Usually we call that file index. And since we're writing HTML, in this case, we're going to call it index.html. So index.html. And then as you can see, I haven't even pressed enter yet, and already my icon has changed. And this is like their HTML icon. And we know it because it has those little caret icons, right? The greater than less than symbol. That's pretty characteristic of HTML. So go ahead and type in that, click enter, and then you should see something like this. Our file has been opened and it's blank, right? We have officially started from scratch with a blank file. Okay, cool. Hopefully we're all good at this point. Do let me know if you're having issues there. But let's go ahead into defining our HTML structure. So remember that the very first line is the doc type. Let me go back into slides to kind of show everyone. So the very first line is this doc type declaration. Let me make this a little bigger. Whoa, that's weird. When I zoom in, that's so weird. When I'm zooming in, the text actually gets smaller. But anywho, you see this doc type, right? Exclamation mark doc type HTML. This is pretty much the first line that every HTML file starts with. So we're gonna go ahead and put it in there. So another thing about like typing this out, honestly, in the future, it's very rare that you're going to be typing all of this from scratch. Usually you have some template or you copy and paste this from somewhere and just paste it in. But in the beginning, when you're starting out, I highly encourage you to avoid copy and pasting. Not because I think it's cheating, right? It's not actually cheating, right? Copy and pasting is like a regular thing that programmers do, like in professional field. The reason why I encourage typing out everything in the beginning is because it builds muscle memory, right? And muscle memory will make you faster at coding. And yeah, it'll just make you understand each bit better if you're going through it slower. So while it might seem a pain, I encourage you to actually type out everything in the beginning. Cool. So we're going to go ahead and click onto our HTML file here. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay, and then we're going to start typing our first line, which is the doc type declaration. So less than symbol or greater than symbol, exclamation mark, doc type. Oh, you also might see this this autocomplete right here. You're welcome, I guess, to click it or click enter to autofill it. But I'm going to stick by my tenet of like typing everything out in the beginning. But this is something that Visual Studio does offer if you do want to use that. So just a quick note there, doc type. And then I'm going to write HTML. Cool. So that's our first line. Now we're gonna get into the HTML tag. So looking back on the left here, we have HTML. You don't have to put this lang equal n. That's kind of like an optional thing. That's just say if you wanted to clear the language that's being used on your site, like not the programming language, sorry, the human linguistic language. I don't know the official term for it. But I'm gonna go ahead and type the HTML tag. And then I'm not gonna put the lang on mine. You're welcome to do it on yours. And then I'm gonna put the closing tag. And I don't know if you guys noticed that, but I actually didn't type this end tag. All I did was type in this part, and then I pressed I clicked this last like arrow symbol, and then it auto completed it for me. So that's fine, right? I think like this is one of the things that VS Code does for you. It's like if it sometimes auto completes tags like that. Don't worry about that. It's something you'll get used to as a programmer. Like a lot of our editor tools will like help us with things. So, that's totally cool. And then we're going to go ahead and press enter so that they're sitting on kind of separately and they're not all in one line. Okay, cool. Hopefully we're still good so far. Now we're going to get into the two main parts, right? We talked about the most important parts of the structure I want us to take away is the head and the body. So the head, remember, as a reminder, looks like this on the left, and the body looks like this. So it's the word body. So let's start with our head. So I'm going to type in the word head and then put the end part. And once again, VS Code auto completes the last tag for me. That's kind of nice. Your editor, if you're not using VS Code, the behavior might be slightly different, but I think most modern editors do something like this where they complete the last tag for you. Yeah, it's kind of convenient, right? Programmers are notorious for being kind of lazy. We like to have a lot of the work done for us, so that's probably why they enable this behavior by default. Okay, cool. So let's focus on the head for now. Remember that the head, the purpose of this head tag is to kind of give additional information about the website that doesn't show up on the web page itself. It's just like meta information. So as an example, let's just give our page a title. So I'm going to type in the tag or the greater than symbol, title, end, greater than symbol or less than symbol. I'm just going to call them carrots for now on. Hopefully you guys know what I mean when I say carrots. Just greater than symbol, less than symbol is just too much to say. So I'm just going to call them carrots. Okay, so we have something like this with our title. Let's give our page a title. In this case, let's call it, I don't know, automate everything. I agree. That's the programmer way. So let's just call it like our first website. It doesn't really matter here. You can title it whatever you want. I'm just gonna call mine our first website. Okay, so I'm gonna save this and I'm gonna do a quick note. Like some people might notice that we're like indenting here, right? Like HTML starts out on the left, and then our head tag goes 2 indents in, and then our title tag goes 2 spaces in again, right? Some might ask, like, what is the purpose of this, right? And the honest answer is that for the browser or like from the computer's perspective, there's no real purpose, right? We could actually do all of this in one line technically, and it'll still work the same. Like it'll still work if we just did all of this on one line. But the problem here, and I'll be saying this a lot as we go through, is that even though this works, like it works on paper, it's not wrong objectively. The purpose of code most of the time is not actually to have the browser or computer or compiler or whatever understand it. It's to have other people understand it, like other humans or yourself. And honestly, this is just not as readable, right? Even though it does the same thing on paper, like we could write all of our code on one line. That's not considered good practice, right? Good practice is writing code that's human understandable, not computer understandable. So that's something I'll be talking a lot more as we go through, but just wanted to make a quick note of that. So someone asked, how do you delete lines? Yeah, great question. So let me go ahead and undo that little thing there. So if you want to delete a line, you could go ahead and basically there's many ways to do it. Like you can just kind of put your cursor at the end of a line and just click backspace all the way. Like you just keep clicking it basically or hold it and then your line is deleted. The other way is to also kind of just double click to select the whole line Like if you double click it here, it selects a whole line, and then you can delete. There's also keyboard shortcuts you can use. Like I think if you do Command L, yeah. So for Mac, if you Command L, on Windows it might be Control L. Someone on Windows confirmed for me. But if you want to get advanced, right, it's like clicking is always going to be slower than doing keyboard shortcuts. So if you do want to practice keyboard shortcuts, you could do Command L, and that will quickly select the whole line. So I didn't even have to use my mouse, right? Command L and then backspace. Gotcha. Good. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So hopefully we're good there. I'm going to go ahead and save this file. So I'm going to go do Command S. Oh, one other thing about VS Code, excuse me, is that as we made changes to our file, I don't know if y'all can see this. Excuse me. I'm going to circle over this little circle. You see this white circle here next to the index.html word? This circle means that this file is unsaved. We have unsaved changes. Okay, someone corrected. It's Control Z for the line select. Okay, good call there. Yeah, I need to get better at understanding the Windows stuff because I think a lot of the keyboard shortcuts I know are only all Mac. Anywho, so this white circle right here means that our files are unsaved. My file's unsaved. So we need to save it. So I'm going to do Command S or Control S on Windows, I think. And now it's going to save the file. And as you can see, after we saved it, that white circle disappears. So now we know our work is saved. Cool. So let's just stop here. So we have our basic file. Now the next step we're going to do is we're going to load this file into our browser. Right? We did a little bit of this last time with the homework. But once again, if you didn't get the chance to do homework or you weren't at last session, no worries, right? This is we're going to do kind of walk through the same thing here. So there's many different ways you can open this file in your browser. I think the easiest way for most people is just right-click it. Oops. And I think on Windows you have like Reveal in Explorer or something like that. On Mac you'll have like Reveal in Finder. Once again, I apologize. The text is kind of small there. So you have Reveal in Finder, which will basically open the file in your Windows Explorer, right? Or your File Explorer that comes with your computer. As you can see, this is our first website folder, and inside we have our index.html file. Great. So the thing is, if we double click this file, it's going to open on whatever our computer's default program is, which in this case is, well, I guess in this case is a browser, but some people might have like TextEdit or like Notepad or something like that. So usually I don't suggest double clicking it because you don't know what that's going to do usually. What I would do though is drag the file into the browser. So make sure you have your browser open. I'm gonna go ahead and click and replace this tab. I'm gonna go ahead and drag the file. I guess you could drag as a new tab. So I'm gonna drag it up here. Okay, cool. So if all goes well, you should see just the white screen. Like there actually is nothing on this website. But if you look closely, no, I can't zoom in. I can zoom in everything on the page, I guess, but the top part. So I apologize if it's kind of small. Maybe if I hover over it, it's a little better. But I don't know if you guys can see that, but it says our first website. You'll see that? So this is the same text that we put in our head, right? Or our title, rather, right here on the right. So this is what I mean, right? Like, there's nothing on our website. Our website is just blank. Like, this is what a blank HTML page looks like. There's absolutely nothing. It's all white. But everything that we put in our head tag, or rather our title and our head tag, that's going to show up as like some additional information about this page. In this case, it's like the title of the page. Cool. Hopefully that all makes sense so far. Excuse me. So now we're going to actually make stuff show up on the page. So remember, let's go back to our slides really quick. We just did everything in the head tag, right? We just set up our head tag. We set up our title, right? That's all working pretty well, hopefully. Now we're going to get into the body. And the body is everything we put in the body. That's what's going to actually show up on the website. So here under our head tag, so I'm going to click here and press enter to create a new line. I'm going to go ahead and do our body tag. Body. Okay. And then here, in everything in the body, this is what's going to show up on the web page. So you can just type in text. In programming, it's common that you type in like when you're starting out a new language, you use hello world. There's a long history of why they use hello world, but just it's like a tradition almost as to why they use hello world. So I'm just going to put hello world here. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Oh, someone asked if my VS Code doesn't give me an indent. Is that a setting thing? That's a good question. Let me look into that. I think this is a fresh install, so I was hoping that the settings should be restored to default. No. This is totally fine. I highly encourage the questions because yeah, like my setup might be configured a little differently. Let me look into that. So by that you mean like when you click enter, it doesn't automatically start here, right? It's kind of, it doesn't indent for you. Let me look into that, why that's happening. Let's see. There might, are there any extensions? Oh, it starts at the beginning of the line. Let me see if I have any extensions going on here. Maybe I still do. Show extensions. I don't have any extensions installed, but there might still be some. Let me look into that further. Let's see. Like OG attribute HTML did the same. And just to also check, is this icon showing up for you too? Like this little caret symbol icon? Maybe there's something with VS Code that we have to set up to get that to happen. I'm not quite sure. Can anybody in the chat know if okay, everything else is great. That is weird. Let's and the title should have been tab 2. Okay, that's interesting. For now, I will just say if you have to manually like space it out. So let's say like you press enter and it doesn't start like indented. It just starts here. You know, you can just for now remember that like even if we put this all on one line, like even if it doesn't look like indented, it's fine, right? The only reason why we're doing all this indenting is because it just looks easier. So for now, I will just say if your editor isn't doing it automatically, just use like tab, just like press tab to get that indent, and you might have to do it manually. It's going to be kind of a pain, but don't worry because we're going to be installing. You added an extension to auto tidy. Maybe there's like an auto tidy extension that we need here. But for now, I would just say like if it's not doing it for you automatically, you're gonna have to do it manually. For now, we're not gonna do that very long though. We will like go through and add extensions. Like yeah, someone mentioned prettier or like ESLint. But yeah, for now, like since this is just the very basics, we don't need that yet. We will be downloading and setting those up soon. But yeah, thank you all for the suggestions. Those will all if you install them, those should like fix it. But yeah, I'll look into that a little bit more to see why that's happening. Okay, yeah, thanks everyone for the help there. That's pretty helpful. I didn't quite know that it wasn't automatic for everyone. Cool. So we just added this hello world text. And I'm going to save the file, right? Command S, make that little white circle go away. And another thing I want us to remember is that when we're doing just basic HTML, right? This is just basic HTML. As you notice, I've saved the file, yet our hello world text is nowhere to be seen, right? And this is because we're just using a local file here, we unfortunately have to refresh the browser every time we make a change. When we get into JavaScript and then we use all the fancy JavaScript frameworks and tooling, we have it so that every time we make a change in our file, we save it, the browser will automatically update for us. But unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. We're just starting with the basics. And back in the old days, back before all the fancy JavaScript frameworks and tooling, this is how people did web development, right? They would make changes, save, and then refresh the browser. So I just saved the file. So I got to go to my browser and I'm going to click refresh. And then you should see we have hello world here. My text might be a little bigger than y'all's also because I've zoomed in for visibility. But generally you should see that hello world text there. Cool. So this is our basic structure, right? Just to recap, the head tag, we have our title, right? The title like shows up as the title of this tab right here. And then in the body, everything we put in the body is going to show up here. Cool. We haven't gotten to any of the like HTML elements or anything like that. This is just basic structure. Cool. So hopefully everyone's good at this point. Do let me know if you're having any issues with any of this we covered. But if everyone's good, we'll go ahead and move on. All right. Cool. So now let's get more into text, right? We already wrote hello world, but that's just like default text. There are actually like text elements in HTML that have different uses. So text, it's one of the core parts of HTML, right? Almost every web page you go on has text, so that's kind of why we are starting with text. And there's many different types of text, right? Once again, I don't want to feel like a broken record, but I'm just saying a lot of this because it's important to know. You don't have to memorize all this, right? This is the purpose of like these slides and just these outlines is just to kind of give you an idea of what's out there. And the actual memorization, that stuff, that's going to come 100 times faster when you're just making the projects. So just to call that out there. Excuse me. So let's start with talking about heading text. So heading text in HTML, it looks something like this H1 right here. It starts with the letter H, and it has a number after it. And the number represents the hierarchy, the visual hierarchy, or basically another way to put it is just like the size or the importance of the text. So H1 is the most important, aka the biggest text for headers. And then H6 is the smallest. So one might ask, like, what is heading text exactly? I guess, using the slides as an example, these words right here, HTML text, see how they're like bolded, right? They're kind of bold compared to the text here. In this case, the HTML text is the header, right? This is our heading text. So heading text is just like titles, basically like titles, bold text. That's one way you can think about heading text. Okay, so next let's talk about paragraph text. Paragraph text is symbolized by this P tag. See right here is caret P caret. This is a lovely paragraph. And then we have the caret/P caret. So this is a paragraph right here, right? Everything in between these P tags is going to be a paragraph. Okay, cool. And once again, we're going to be demoing all this in our website, so it's going to make a lot more sense. Actually, let's go ahead and maybe add them as we go. That might be easier. So we have a question here. H tags are used in every type of website. Not. So the thing about HTML is that like, what tags you choose to use, they're honestly more of like suggestions. Like you don't have to have like heading text in a website, right? You can like, for example, if we wanted to make something that looks like this website right here for the slides, you can make text look like this, even if it's just paragraph text, right? Because you can use CSS to style it. So to answer the question, like H tags or heading tags are used in most websites, but it's not like a requirement. It's more of just like, it's a style thing, right? People are just like used to making the most important text, like the titles, headers. So hopefully that makes sense. But you should see header tags in most websites, definitely. Okay, so actually, it might make it a little bit easier if I type these tags in our website as we go. So going back to header text really quick, let's say we want to make this hello world text a header, right? Specifically, let's make it the biggest type of header. Let's make it an H1. Remember, H1 is the biggest and H6 is the smallest. So how we're going to do this is, well, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this line. So I'm going to go ahead and type caret H1, n caret. And then I'm going to type in, this is a header. Sorry about the ambulance here. Wait for that to pass. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Yeah, New York. Anywho, we have our header text here. And just before we save, let's also do a smaller header. Let's do like H6 or something, just to show the size differences. So I'm going to do H6. And I'm just going to say something like this is a smaller header. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So Command S, save our file. Little circle's gone. Okay, now we're going to go back to our file here. I'm going to click it. Once again, I got to refresh. So I'm going to refresh the page. And hopefully you guys can see this, but basically we have this very big text, right? This is our H1. Once again, my screen is zoomed in, so don't be concerned if your header text is not as big as mine. But basically we see that, but compared to the text before, it's a lot more bold, right? And it's bigger. So this is our H1 header, and this is the H6 header. Oh, someone asked, like, so, yes, yeah, thanks for answering that, Cozy Pack. So Slime Lion asked, how do we link the website after revealing it my Finder? Yeah, so Cozy Pack, that's a good explanation of it. Yeah, you can just drag the file. So like, let's pretend this is the index.html file. You should just be able to drag it into the browser or like up here on the tab. I think either of those should work. So if you drag it into the browser, it should open. So do let me know if that works. But yeah, thanks Cozy Pack for the assist there. Cool. So we just did some header text. Now let's show some paragraph text, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and just under my H6 here, I'm gonna write a paragraph tag. So remember, the paragraph tag is just the word, or sorry, just the letter P. So caret P, and then we're gonna say like, this is a paragraph. Okay, go ahead and save that. And I'm gonna go ahead and refresh the page here. And we see there, this is a paragraph. Also, I can see wait, that I'm already up on the tower time, even though I already spent a long time talking about how today I do better on time management. So we might have to go over a little bit, but yeah, apologize for that. I am not good at this time management stuff. Probably because I ramble so much. Cool, but as you can see, we have our paragraph text here. Also notice that like this paragraph text by default is bigger than our H6, which is interesting. But it's not as bold, right? I don't know if y'all can see that, but the paragraph text is like not that bold. So someone's saying it's saying the operation couldn't be completed. Is it? Are you using Windows or Mac? Maybe that might help a little bit. We can debug that. Mac. No. Is it saying that the operation can be completed? Is that showing up in your browser? Is that showing up in Visual Studio Code? Maybe we could try another way to do it. Let's see. Let me see if I can dive into that. Operation couldn't be completed. Index in Chrome. In my browser when I dragged file. And you are you using Chrome? Let's see. So this is some Googling. Oh, Safari. Let me test if this works on Safari. Good call. Okay, so I open up Safari here. I'm gonna take my folder file. Oopsies. Let me try this really quick. Where am I? Where's my projects folder? Oh, here. All right, so let's just see if this works. So I'm opening up the file, dragging to Safari. Maybe if you drag it into Chrome might be a little bit better, but it looks like it's working on my Safari. But yeah, just try this in Chrome and see if we get the same issue. But yeah, do let me know if that continues. I mean, Safari is fine, but just for this course, I do recommend people use either Chrome or Firefox. Not because I dislike Safari. I like Safari, but Chrome and Firefox are just a little bit more developer friendly. So that's typically why I recommend them over Safari when it comes to like this class. Someone said longer courses longer classes would be fine. If that's cool with everyone, we might sit a little bit over. I'll still try not to like take up like 2 hours. Like we'll still maybe do like under 1 hour 30 minutes, including the Q&A. But Q&A should be shorter today since we're doing a lot of Q&A as we go. So thanks to everyone for hanging in there. Oh, it worked on Chrome. Okay, cool. So maybe it was something with the Safari. So awesome. That's good to know that's working. Cool. So hopefully we're all good there. We all have this text showing up. And yeah, basically just to recap, we just introduced some header tags, right? These H1, H6, we could do like H2, H3, like there's all the numbers in between are like different sizes. So maybe to demonstrate one more, if we do like H3, a slightly smaller header. H3. So I just typed in another bit of text. I'm gonna save that. Go in our browser, refresh, and then we see our H3 is smaller than H1 but bigger than H6, right? Excuse me. Okay, cool. So we basically just went over heading tags and paragraph tags. These are ones you're going to use a lot. So it's definitely good to get used to like seeing them and recognizing them. And then let's go into talking about the next part here, which are line breaks. So one thing about our text here is that let's say we wanted to put a line break here. Like let's say I wanted this to say this is a, and then a line break, and then paragraph on the next line. Let's observe what happens if I put an enter, if I put that new line in our editor. So I'm gonna click here on here in between this is a and then paragraph. I'm gonna click enter, right? So this looks like a new line, right? This looks like it's 2 lines. I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna refresh the page, and it looks the same, right? We don't have a line break here, yet we have a line break in our code. So then the reason why this is because these are what we call these are inline, right? Like all the new lines that we put in here in our editor, they're not necessarily going to show up in our web browser, which is kind of confusing, right? So how do we do this, right? I want paragraph to be on a different line, yet after putting an enter here, it doesn't show up on a separate line. So the solution here, or one solution, there's many solutions in programming. One solution here is to use a line break. And a line break, so I'm going to hop back to the slides really quick. A line break looks something like this. Once again, it's only bolded because of emphasis, but in your code, it's not going to be bolded. So it looks like this. It looks like this BR tag, right? BR, I think, is short for break in this instance. And also notice that this tag, there's no start or end tag, right? It's just by itself. So this is what we call a self-contained tag. Once again, no need to memorize these terms, but I'm just pointing out that these tags are different than how our paragraph tags and H1 tags looked, right? So once again, don't want us to get too tripped up. Just recognize that this is how you do a line break. It looks a little different. We'll get into the nuances later, but just wanted to kind of highlight that there. So if we put a line break here, so I'm going to go ahead and put this back on the code editor on the right. So if we put a break tag here, so I'm going to put caret br / n caret, and then I'm going to go ahead and save it. Let's hop back over to our website preview. I'm going to go ahead and refresh. Yay, it worked, right? So if anytime you want a line break like that, you can use this br tag like this. So line break. Cool. The remaining tags I'm going to demo here should be more familiar. Like line break's definitely one of the weird ones. Oops, I just realized I didn't even include an example for emphasis. Haha. But if you want italics, right? Let's say I wanted to make, maybe I'll do like a different line here. So I'm going to do another paragraph, and then I'm going to put one of the words in italics. So this word is emphasize. Let's say we want to put the word emphasize in italics, right? What we can do is use M tag. So just EM. And M stands for emphasis, and emphasis is just another way, I guess, of saying italics. You can use the I tag, I think. But one thing is that HTML has changed over time. Whenever you see code that recommends using an I tag or a B tag, those are kind of outdated. The modern way of writing HTML in this instance is to use the M tag. So to demonstrate, we're going to go ahead and type EM, N caret, and then we want this text to be emphasized. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this, or you can just delete it and rewrite it. Either way is fine. Emphasized. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and save this. Once again, save it. Go into our browser, refresh. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but our emphasized text is italicized. Right, so this should be somewhat familiar if you've used a lot of Word document processors and stuff like that, right? This is the same thing as highlighting some text and pressing the I symbol. That's how you make it italicized. And let's round this out by talking about the other common way of styling text, which is bolding, right? So if you wanted to just bold individual words and not just have like the whole thing bolded, like how our headers are, I'm gonna go ahead and create a new, oops, sorry, let me, sorry, 1 second, let me go ahead and turn this down. Okay, there we go. Cool. Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and do the same thing here. So like create a new paragraph. I'm gonna say this word is bold. And for bold, we're gonna use the strong tag. Once again, another way of doing it is using B, the B tag, like B for bold, I for italicized. But the B and the I tags, those are like the old way of writing HTML. It's not considered best practice. So let's go ahead and write our strong tags around this word bold. So we'll go ahead and type caret strong. And I'm gonna take our bold text and put it in between. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. Let's go back to our browser, click refresh. And yeah, we see this word is bold. Cool, how are we feeling so far? Hopefully everyone's pretty good there. There's a lot more to talk about text, but for now, these should cover a lot of the basics of HTML text, right? Cool, so, yeah, we just did add some text. Let's see. How are we feeling so far? If we're feeling a little overwhelmed, then I'm happy to end the session here. But I do want to talk a little bit about CSS, right? I know in a lot of courses, they like have you learn all of HTML, like you learn every single tag first and then do CSS. But I'm a big believer in the principle of interleaving, which is basically the idea of like mixing in topics as a means to learn faster. So when you learn HTML and CSS together, it is it is like harder, right? It feels like sometimes your brain's about to explode because there's a lot going on. But I think if we do a little bit of CSS today, CSS is harder than HTML, but let's just end today with adding a little bit of CSS. Cool. Some people are saying, let's do a little bit of CSS. Maybe not too much. We're not going to get into the craziness. I think after the CSS stuff, it's going to be basic enough that we should be in a good place for the homework. So thanks for the feedback, everyone. Hey, AC team. This is a coding bootcamp that we have going on. We just started last week. This is our 3rd session, so you're pretty early here. But cool, got some good feedback that CSS sounds good. And CSS is hard. We're not going to get too deep into it, but just want to introduce a little bit, just give you all a taste. So cool, thanks for the feedback there. And apologies about the time. All right, so let's talk about CSS now. So if HTML is like the bread and butter is like it's the core of web development, CSS is the second building block I want us to add to our mental model. So CSS files end with the CSS file extension, right? So .css, just like how for HTML we had .html. So when we create CSS files, it's going to be .css. And it has a much higher skill curve than HTML. Honestly, like once you recognize the tags in HTML, it's not too bad, right? It's just like, we got to have a pretty good grasp on like the basics. We didn't cover all of HTML, but we know a little bit about the basics. CSS is definitely a higher skill curve. So I don't want us to get intimidated by that. It honestly took me years to deeply understand CSS. And I would still say I'm not a master of CSS, but like by any means. And I've been doing this for quite some time. And you'll naturally get better at it. Same with HTML, right? You'll naturally get better at HTML and CSS as you build projects. And don't worry about being an expert. Just focus on understanding the fundamentals, and that'll take you very far. And CSS revolves around 3 main terms, right? For HTML, we had 2 main terms, which are elements, well, I guess 3, elements, tags, and attributes. For CSS, we have selectors, properties, and values. Cool, so we're gonna address some questions in chat really quick. Do you know W3 School? Yes, absolutely. I think we were demoing some page from W3 Schools. W3 Schools is a great resource, but my only thing about W3 Schools, like basically if you type in like HTML, or CSS, W3 Schools is usually the first one that comes up, right? Because it's an old website. It's very well established. My only thing with W3 Schools is that it's a little too old. And this is something I was talking about earlier, right? Web development, unfortunately, for better or worse, web development changes very rapidly. And I just find that a lot of the information on W3 Schools is a little outdated. So I would say, if you're going for an HTML CSS resource, if you're going for an HTML CSS resource, I would generally say this website right here, developer.mozilla.org. This is the MDN docs. This is like made by Mozilla, which is the same company that makes Firefox. I think Mozilla has a lot more up-to-date documentation than W3. That being said, it's not as it's like more text. So I guess it's like slightly less beginner friendly, but W3 Schools is still a great resource. I just wanted to put that caveat out there. Cool. So someone asked, why do we end with the HTML? Great question. So if we look back in our code here, the question is why do we have this /HTML? Basically, this represents everything in between these two HTML tags. This is the actual HTML document, right? This line at the top just declares that everything that's going to follow is HTML. And the reason why we have this start HTML tag and this end HTML tag, this is where all of our HTML lives. I don't know if that makes too much sense, but basically, actually, I think if you do in VS Code, or if you have VS Code or Sublime or any similar editor like that, if you hover over, can you all see that? If you, in between the line numbers here on the left, in my code, if you hover over, you see these little down carrots. Y'all see that? The down carrots? And what you can actually do is if you have a ton of code, right? Let's say, we just I'm going to copy and paste this a bunch of times to make this file really long. If I copy and paste this a bunch of times, it's a lot of code to go through, right? It might be a little overwhelming. And you can click on these little carrots to minimize. See that? It it shrinks our code. So by clicking on the HTML, this shrinks our whole document. So short answer is we end with this /HTML because the start and end of those tags represents the whole document. Hopefully that makes sense. Cool. Yeah, no, great explanation, Cozy Pack. That's actually a lot better way of explaining it. So thank you there. So someone else asked, so will you upload your videos to YouTube? Twitch deletes videos. Yes, absolutely. Actually, I think today is the last video. No, today or tomorrow might be the last day that our session 1 will stay up. They are on YouTube. If you do want to see the links to all the recordings, you can. We have a exclamation mark Notion command. So this will give you the homepage of our bootcamp, and that's where you can find all the links to the YouTube recordings, the slides, the homework. That should be the comprehensive homepage for everything. So great question there. Cool. Hopefully we're all good there. Let's go ahead and kind of end with the CSS stuff. Well, so once again, CSS, same with HTML. You don't have to memorize all of CSS, just like you don't have to memorize all of HTML. For now, just recognize these 3 terms: selectors, properties, and values. So let's dive into each of these. One thing also to note is that CSS, the CSS language, it looks different from HTML. And one of the key signifiers that it's CSS and not HTML is the use of these curly brackets, right? In HTML, you won't see a lot of these curly brackets, barely any, right? We mainly see those little caret symbols. But CSS, the core symbol that I guess shows that CSS is the use of these curly brackets, which looks like this right here. So here's an example of what a selector would look like. So P, curly brackets, and then some stuff in here, right? I left the stuff blank, so that's why I put a ... And basically what this little snippet does, this selector is selecting the paragraph tag, right? Remember the P word? If we go back to let me make this bigger. I guess I'll delete that's this copy and paste text. If we just if we look at this tag right here, this P tag, this is our paragraph tag, right? And if you wanted to say, if you wanted to style all the paragraph tags on your site, you would write something that looks like this. So P, curly brackets, and then you would write your rules or your styles in here. So this selector is basically selecting all the paragraph elements in HTML. Cool. So we have a question in chat here. Is doc type HTML a tag or is it an expression? Great question. So a tag, theoretically, technically speaking, this doc type is a declaration. Once again, these syntax questions, I don't want us to get too tripped up on, because honestly, I promise you, if I were to ask like a senior or principal level web developer, like, hey, define a tag or define a declaration, like they're not gonna know, honestly, because it's not that important, right? When you're like actually on the job, even when you're doing a coding interview, it's like they're not gonna ask you, hey, like what's the difference between a tag and a declaration? So I just want to put that out there. But you know, for the purpose of being like not saying the wrong thing, technically this doc type line right here, it's not actually a tag, it's a declaration. Even though it looks like a tag, I know it's confusing. I only learned this recently when I was doing the slides for this, that it's like something else, right? I would have called this a tag. So the actual definitions are not too important here, but this is technically a declaration. And in a homework, I'll show you some resources that will do a lot better job of like explaining all this stuff. And hopefully after that, we should have a better idea. Okay, cool. So we just covered selectors. And don't worry if this doesn't make too much sense right now. Remember, like these slides are just to introduce these things. And then in our demo, that's where it's going to all come together more. Okay, so the next part, so we talked about selectors. The next key part of CSS are properties. So a property actually says the style, right? Like it determines what style is actually going to be applied. So remember, in CSS, the flow is like you select something, right, with a selector. You select something on the web page. So you target a particular part of your HTML. That's what a selector does. So that it just targets the HTML. And then the property actually says what you want to style. So property names, they fall after the selector. So they're in between the curly braces. And they come before the colon, a colon symbol. So if we expand our previous example, here we're selecting the P tag, right? So P, curly braces, we're selecting the P tag. And then we have this word color, and then we have this colon. So the word color here is a property. This is our color property. Specifically, what this does is that this property will change the text color of all paragraphs. We haven't said what color we're going to change it to, right? Because we're going to get into that next. But this word right here, color, this is what we call a property. Once again, memorization is not important. Recognition is more important. So let's just recognize that this is what a property looks like. And then to finalize and round our little CSS basics out, let's talk about the last part, which are values. So values is, in this example, it actually will say what color you're changing the text in the paragraph to. So the values are basically everything that comes after the colon. Oops, my syntax is not right here because I was supposed to write a semicolon. I'll edit it really quick. But basically it should be like, it should come after the colon and it should end in a semicolon. I mistakenly left it out, but this is actually saying, okay, so for all the paragraph tags on this page, change the text color to blue. Okay, so once again, not memorization not important. Let's go ahead and finish up our demo with what we just did, and hopefully that's going to be a good end for today. They'll all come together a lot more. Okay, but before we do that, we can't just go to our code editor, create a new CSS file, and have it work, right? Because remember, our web page reads the HTML file. And to load JavaScript, to load CSS, those have to be connected in our HTML. So the specific way of how we do that is we basically have to link our CSS to our HTML. And to do this, there are many ways to do it, but the best practice way is to use something called a link tag. It's confusing because many people think this link tag is like, a hyperlink, right? When you click on a link and it opens a new page, like that's what we think of when we think of link tag, but this is a different type of link. I don't know who named this stuff, but they should have called it something else. Basically, we have to use this link tag and we add the file path, basically the path or the name of our CSS file or the location of it. We're going to add that to the link tag. and then our HTML will actually load the CSS. So an example of what this all looks like, it's kind of long, right? But this is an example of what a link tag could look like. So let's break it down. So we see the link word, right? And then we have this rel, R-E-L, equals style sheet. This is, I honestly can't explain like what exactly this means. Basically, to my understanding, this is just saying, hey, hey, HTML document, link to a CSS or style sheet file. I'm sure there's a better explanation for that, but this is more of just trust me on this. It's like a standard practice rather than a good explanation. So hopefully that makes sense. And then we have this thing called href. So href is like the actual file path. It's like the destination of our file. So it's going to look like something like, in this case, let's say we have a folder next to our index.html file called assets. In that folder, we have another folder called style sheets. And in that style sheets folder, let's say we have our CSS file called main.css. This is how we would point to it, right? This is how we would connect that CSS file to our HTML. And once again, this link tag, it should belong in your head tag. That's like a best practice thing. It will technically work, I think, if you put it in your body, but we're all about best practice here, right? Like we don't want to do things just because we can. We want to do the right way or standard way. So it's best to put this link tag in your head. And let's go ahead and demo this now. So let's put all of that stuff we just talked about, the CSS, into practice. It's going to seem like a lot, but once again, I just want us to go through the exercise of doing this like very basic example. And then our brains are going to start making those mental models a lot faster. Okay, so someone said ref. This attribute names a relationship of the link document to the current document. Oh, that's right. Yeah. So VS Code actually, I think you can hover over. I don't know if you can see that, but like you can hover over tags and it'll actually give you the definition. That's actually nice. I wish I forgot about that. But oh yeah. So thanks for the explanation there. But yeah, if you do get confused about certain tags or like forget what they mean, if you're in VS Code or something like Sublime or something like that, I think you could just hover over the tags with your mouse and it should give an explanation. Okay, but we're almost done here. We're close on time, but we're hitting the home stretch. So to finalize this demo, we're gonna create our first CSS file. We're gonna link it to our HTML file. And then let's just create a CSS file. Let's create a basic style. Like let's style our paragraph tag. Let's make them blue, just like how we did in our examples. And then let's link it to our HTML. And that's how we're gonna end today, okay? Cool, so once again, to create a new file in VS Code, many ways to do it, but easiest way is to just go ahead and click this new file icon right here. I don't know if you can see that, new file. So go ahead and click that. You should see something like this. Once again, name does not matter. You can call it anything you want, but there's like a standard, there's standard naming practices. Typically, you call your first CSS file like main index, or something like that. Let's just call it like main.css. So I'm gonna do main.css, enter. Cool, and you see that we have like a different icon, right? The CSS icon was represented by this hash. We'll explain the hash stuff in next lesson probably, but basically this is the symbol for CSS files, so that's how we know it's different. And we have a new tab here. So we're gonna go ahead and select our p tag, right? In our HTML we see we have some p tags right here, right? We have some paragraphs, and let me open up my website. Like right now the default color is black, right? All of these are black. So some people probably have different icons. I guess if you downloaded like a file an icon pack, you might have like a different icon. So that's a good call out there. But if you have the default VS Code icon pack, it looks like it's going to be a hash. So good call there. Cool. So let's go ahead, and our goal is to make all this paragraph text blue. Why? I don't know. This is just to demonstrate like CSS in a simple way. So remember that first we have to select the element or select what we want to style. So we tell CSS we want to select the paragraph tag by this syntax, and we type P, right? Because P is the paragraph tag, and then we're going to type those curly braces. And then once again, for visibility, this is more of a human readable thing than a computer readable thing. I'm going to go ahead and put an enter here. you might see some like, you might see some underlined warnings. I like to joke that it's like the editor is like mad at us when there's like an error like underlined like that. Don't worry about that, right? It's just basically saying that it's empty, which we know, right? We haven't said anything in here yet. But yeah, you should end up with something like that looks like this. Let me make the text a little bigger. Okay. Okay, so now that we've created our selector, right? This is our selector. Let's add our property. And in this case, we're going to add the color property. So I'm going to type in the word color. Oh, as you can see, it's auto-filling. Like, there's so many properties, right? Once again, I don't want us to get concerned about like, oh my God, there's like all these properties. I have to memorize them all. Trust me, you don't. I've been doing this for a long time. I do not recognize a lot of these properties. So you do not have to memorize it. But just for now, we're just doing the simple property of color. So COL is color. And color is confusing because color could refer to background color or text color. In this case, for CSS, when we just use the word color standalone, this always means text color. So just to point it out there. So color, and we're going to type in colon, right? So this is our color property. Okay, so after the colon, this is where we're going to tell the CSS the value, right? What color do we want this paragraph to be, right? So I'm going to type in the word blue. Oh, one other thing about VS Code, as you can see, there's like a color picker, and it even tells you like all the built-in colors. Like CSS is a bunch of like built-in color words. Like I think there's like dark blue, there's like royal blue, right? Yeah, there's like a bunch of different built-in colors you can use. I think there's even Chuck Norris. I don't know if they removed that, but there used to be like a Chuck Norris color, which is weird. I'm gonna go ahead and use royal blue actually, just because that's fancy. So I'm gonna type in royal blue. And then I didn't do this in my demo or in my slides, but you basically always have to put a semicolon after to separate each property value pair. So this is the property, this is the value. Cool. All right. So I'm going to save this, right? And remember, we just created a new file. Like we just created a new file. We put some CSS code in it, but we have not linked it to our HTML, right? So our HTML currently does not have access to any of that styling we just wrote. And we can prove this by going to our web browser, refreshing, and we see that none of this is blue, right? None of that's changed. So to link it, we need to go into our head tag, and we need to write that really long link tag. So let's go ahead and do that together. So under the title, I mean, it doesn't really matter where you put it. I can put it over the title, but once again, best practice. It's usually featured under the title. I'm going to type in the link tag. So caret link rel equals style sheet. Okay. And then we have to put the href. In the href, we have to say where the CSS file is. So this part is going to be a little tricky, but basically because the CSS file is like right next to our HTML, and I say right next because, they live on the same level, right? There's like the HTML file and there's a CSS file like right next to it. That's why I call it that. I'm going to go ahead and say href equals, and we have these double quotes here. Oh yeah, make sure you have the double quotes as well. It's not going to work if you don't have those double quotes here. So just to call it there. Okay, href. And then there's many ways you can select that file. Like we can just type, I think we could just type in main.css. And as you can see, VS Code is nice to autocomplete that for us. So I'm just typing main.css. You can also do /main.css, which is another way of saying like next to this index.html file, grab the file called main.css. Both are fine, right? Both are fine. You can do this way, you can do this way, doesn't matter. And then I'm gonna go ahead and end this link tag. So this tag, let me actually, sorry, excuse me. Let me make that a little readable because it was kind of split on two lines. So here we're just gonna end our tag. You can technically, I think, do this. Like you can have this as a, an empty set of like an open and close tag. But basically another way of writing this, like a shorter way of writing this open link tag and close link tag, is just to put only one tag and to put a slash before the final caret. We'll get more into like why this stuff is later. but it kind of reminds you of the break tag here, right? We just have one tag and we have a slash before the end caret. So this is more of like a trust me, trust me thing. We'll get to the explanations of why this is later, or you might even see it in the homework. But let's just save this, and our test, right? Coding is all about testing, right? I want us to get into the habit of like having something we expect on the page to happen. And then if it doesn't happen, then we know something's wrong, right? So in this case, I expect when I refresh this page, because I just saved this HTML file, right? I expect when we refresh this page that our paragraph text, so this stuff right here, is going to be blue, or royal blue to be specific. So drum roll, moment of truth. Let's go ahead and refresh this page. Yay, it worked. That would have been kind of embarrassing for me if it didn't. But good. I'm glad that I at least know, basic how to connect the CSS. So yay, as you can see, our text is now blue. And this is because the styles that we wrote in our main.css, we've selected all the paragraph tags and we've applied this color style. So the last thing we'll do before we leave, let's say we want to just make the font size really big, right? Let's just do one more property, right? We've talked about the color property. Let's just end with one more property. So this for font size, it's going to be called, thankfully, it's called font size. So another thing about CSS is that, I don't know if you guys can see this, but all of the properties here, they have dashes, right? This is just like the style of naming properties. If you call it like this, like just no dash, or like this, it's not gonna work. It has to follow the exact name of the property. So if you do like write a style and it doesn't work, do check the spelling of the property. So that's something I make the mistake of all the time. So I'm gonna go ahead and type in font dash size, all lowercase, remember colon, and then we're gonna say, here you can say there's many different ways you can write this, but simplest thing is just to use pixels, right? If we want really big text, we can use like 48 pixels, 64 pixels, like stuff like that, right? Similar to Microsoft Word or Google Docs. So I'm gonna type in 48 px, and then remember, we have to have the semicolon. Let's see what happens if I don't put the semicolon, right? Just to show y'all that every little character actually matters in CSS a lot more than it does in HTML. I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna go ahead and go to our browser, refresh. Wow, I feel stupid now because it actually did work. It wasn't supposed to work. I think it's because this is the last property. If I took off this one, yeah, see, if I took off this like second to last property, it actually doesn't work. Like, let me save it and refresh. Yeah, so I guess I lied. It's actually fine to not have the colon on the last property of a selector. But for best practice, I highly encourage you to get in the habit of adding colons after the selector. Remember, we're not writing code for the computer necessarily. We're writing code for ourselves and other people to easily read, right? Nobody wants to go into a code base that has like all this jank stuff going on. Like, it's just confusing and painful for everyone. Cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this and refresh the page. And as you can see, our paragraph text is now huge. It's actually even bigger than our header text, and it's blue. Cool. So I'm gonna answer this question here. A friend of mine suggested me to install Prettier, a code format matter. Do you think this will be useful, or learn code? It could be. So we're gonna talk a lot more about Prettier, ESLint, like all these like extensions that are standard practice. The short answer is, by the end of the course, you absolutely will have Prettier, ESLint, like all these like standard code tools installed. In the beginning, though, this kind of goes back to what I was saying about muscle memory. I think one thing about Prettier is that it makes things a little too easy for you sometimes. Like in the beginning, it's kind of good to like struggle through the process of like making your code intentionally look nice. The thing is, like, if you get really used to using Prettier, and I mean, I'm very used to using Prettier. Like, basically, if I use another computer that doesn't have like Prettier and ESLint set up, it's a kind of a pain to format everything. So I would say, like, right now, while we're doing the basics of HTML CSS, I'm not going to strongly advocate for or against Prettier. It's kind of up to you. But just from my perspective, I don't think it's really needed until later when you're writing a lot more complex code, right? Because that's where Prettier comes into, like, that's the value of Prettier, right? When you have a lot of code, and it's like kind of messy, and you save it in auto formats, that's really nice. In the beginning, you can get away with it by just like manually tabbing and manually formatting it. So yeah, I don't really have a great answer there for like whether or not it's like harmful to use that as a beginner. It probably isn't, but I'm big on. I think a big thing is like muscle memory, and I feel like Prettier does kind of give you less muscle memory in the beginning. But if you have Prettier installed, by all means use it. I really don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. This is just me kind of nitpicking. Okay, cool. So I know we're way over, but thank you all for sticking around. Hopefully that was like a more comprehensive, like more better paced lesson than last Thursday. And let's just end here with our homework. So in preparation for Thursday, right? Thursday, we're going to be doing a lot more of GitHub Desktop. We're going to be diving more into CSS. Remember, we only scratched the surface of CSS. We're just trying to get the basics out. So I want us to download GitHub Desktop. I know people had issues with GitHub last time, and I didn't really have a good answer because I didn't want to get too deep into the GitHub world. We're going to start to do that a little bit more on Thursday. So I want us to download this link. Go to this link and download it. I can go ahead and share it in the chat. It's also in the slides. It's going to be in Notion. But go ahead and download the GitHub Desktop client and basically just log in. You don't need to do anything else. Just like get that set up. But the real homework is I want us to basically, even if you did do this exercise today, like during class, I want you to see if you can do this again. Like basically start over and do this whole project again. And one might ask, like, why do that, right? Like, what's the point if I already kind of didn't know it? Once again, it all comes down to muscle memory, right? I think muscle memory is actually really underrated when you're learning how to program in the beginning. And the point of doing all this from scratch is to get the muscle memory of 1, setting up an HTML document from scratch, 2, setting up a CSS document from scratch, and then 3, linking them together, right? That's really what I want us to take away and get used to practicing. So I just included like some steps here if you do want to go into those details. If you want to go above and beyond, like let's say you want to see the full list of, CSS properties, I included a link here that includes like a more comprehensive list you can use. So this shouldn't take too long. Whole thing should probably take less than 30 minutes. But what I really want us to do in preparation of for next session is to, and you don't actually have to have this done by next session, but if you have time, I would say Shay Howell. So this link right here, I'll share it in the chat. Go through his HTML CSS. It's not a book per se. I guess it's kind of like an ebook, but it's just basically like a really well organized set of like lessons that gets more into the details of HTML CSS. Like once again, today I really try to stress that memorization is not the key, but you're going to progress a lot faster if you have recognized more tags. And Shay Howell just has a lot more comprehensive list than what I could cram into like a 1 hour, 30-minute presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share that link in the chat. Once again, it's also in the slides. So even if you don't, you can't see the chat or you missed the chat, you can always click on the slides, and of course it's in the Notion as well. But I think that's basically it. And I know it says 15 minutes here, but we might have to cut that a little short. Also, I think today we don't have any more. We shouldn't have that many more questions because we did do a lot of questions during the class. Also the feedback form. If you want to give feedback, go ahead to you can do the exclamation mark feedback command, and I think that link should work. But that will give you an anonymous Google form if you do want to give me feedback on how the class can be improved or what you liked, what you didn't like. Once again, we're always trying to improve here, so that feedback form is really helpful. Of course, you can also do it in Discord as well. Cool. I'm going to answer some questions here. Can you download the slides? That's a good question. I don't know. I'm using a platform called Tome. Like one of my Twitter mutuals, like is building the startup, and I liked it. It's like pretty minimalistic, but it's very early, so I'm guessing downloading slides is like one of the features that they don't have yet. But I'll ask him to build it, and then maybe next time they'll have it ready. But that's a good call. I'll ask him to see if he can get that to happen. Okay, so next question. Sorry to go back to list Thursday. Are we going to follow up on the HTML5 templates, or is that not necessary? Yeah, so I think Thursday, so in 2 days, we're going to be revisiting our HTML5 templates, and we're going to get more into like the GitHub part too, because I know that felt really rushed. That was my bad there. And the goal of Thursday is like we're going to basically revisit it. You can basically like you don't have to do anything with the template you have today. You can kind of maybe use some of what we learned in the lessons to go back and, make some improvements. But ultimately, like, you don't have to worry about that HTML5 template for now. We're going to be revisiting how to like deploy it a little bit easily and use GitHub better on Thursday. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you everyone for the feedback. Super helpful. Great questions, everyone. Yeah, I think the style I like this style a lot more of like taking the questions as they come. And then, yeah, I think that seemed to be good. So I'll probably continue to do that next time. But yeah, do let me know if you have any final questions. Otherwise, I'll probably start to end things here over the next few minutes. But yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. Oh yeah, thank you, Cozy Pack. You were great in the chat helping out. Really appreciate that. Yeah, honestly, I'm really super happy about this community. It's been super helpful, super enthusiastic. It's like everything I could have asked for. So yeah, shout out to y'all. Y'all are great. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I'll stick around for maybe like a few more minutes, but I gotta get to work on my app. If you all don't know yet, I'm building like a companion app for this class that has like a lot more exercises, a lot more projects. And it's been like kind of a challenge to balance like preparing the slides and building the app, but almost there. Just gotta like this like the last home stretch to code out. So I'll probably hop off and start to work on that. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, y'all. Yeah, see you guys on Thursday. Thursday should be good. It's gonna be fun. Once again, gonna try to not make it too crazy. And yeah, I think the hour session, I'm realizing like that's just I think I'm just gonna set expectations that the lessons are probably gonna be like an hour 30 minutes because clearly I struggle with keeping things under an hour. But hopefully that's better for everyone, right? All right, see y'all on Thursday. Thanks all for coming. Ciao.